Awesome. Good evening. Good afternoon, guys. Today we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic, a topic that I love very much, a topic that is very close to my heart. I've been, studying banks, for the last five to about 8 years, since high school. And I've always wanted to understand the banking model, the banking system, how to build long-term wealth, how to build long-term sustainable wealth. What makes banks succeed? What makes banks last for 100 years? There are banks that have been there since 1800s, and I wanted to learn the secrets therein because I believe that if you want to be a big boy, if you want to be a force to be reckoned with in business or in any other thing, you always need to study the people who are winning and the people who have been winning and the people who continue to win. So I've always been one who's been fascinated by the banking system, wanting to study how do the banks win, what makes the banks winners, right? Why are the banks such serial winners, and how to build a business that can last over 100 years. And I studied the banking, model, and wanting to understand the bank's relationship to property, wanting to understand the bank's relationship to money, wanting to understand the philosophy of banks. Because if a business has been there for 100 years, surely there's something in it for you to learn. Surely there's something in it for you as one who also has plans to build long-term wealth. There is something for you to learn. And today I'll be sharing some of my lessons. And I was actually supposed to title this "What the Banks Don't Want You to Know About Money," but I named the title as "How to Invest in Property Like the Banks," which to me is pretty much the same thing, because if you understand the banking system, then you will at least be able to understand money. And when you understand money, you'll be able to understand why property. When you understand why property, you also be able to understand the shift of digital currency that is happening right now in the world, and how you can be able to build the fourth industrial revolution through cryptocurrencies. But today I will not be digging too much into any of those. I'll be more talking about how to invest in property like the banks, right? Like the banks. Now, a lot of people don't understand how the banking system came about. And I read a very interesting book a couple of years back, and the name of the book is The Creature from Jekyll Island. The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's a book written by an amazing author, Edward Griffiths. Now, what this guy teaches, right? He talks about, how the banking system came about, how the Federal Reserve banking system came about. And a lot of us don't understand what is the Federal Reserve Bank and who is the Federal and what are they. And today I've got something shocking for you, that the Federal Reserve Bank is not a federal bank and it has no reserves. And you'll be shocked that it's not really a bank, it's a cartel. Now, what is a cartel? A cartel is there to control resources or the supply of money, right? Now, how did this Federal Reserve Bank giant come about? So a meeting was done around the 1900s, a meeting prior that meeting actually, during the late 1800s and towards the early 1900s. The banks, used to save. When you promised people that when you save or deposit money in the bank, you can come to the bank and ask them to give you your money back at any given point in time. And the banks made people to believe that when you deposit money in the bank, your money is saved in a, what do you call this, in a vault, only to discover that your money was not saved in a vault after you deposited it to the bank. Rather, when you deposited money to the bank, the money took your money, the bank took your money and loaned it to the next person, right? And then because of the banks did this, then there was a problem of lack of money in the bank. Why? Because your money, when you saved money, the bank would take your savings and loan to the next person so that the banks could get cash flow. Very important word, cash flow. Money that comes in on a monthly basis, right? So that was the banking model of the time. Now, when people discovered this, they got annoyed. Why did they get annoyed? They got annoyed because they could not access their money when they wanted to. In other words, if you saved 1,000 rand onto the bank back in the days, the bank would take your $1,000 and loan it to the next person. And then maybe you come 2 weeks later and you say, listen, I want my money back. And the bank would not be able to give you your money back. Why? Because your money was given to the next person. So it was a very, interesting thing. And so these people were living in very interesting times, right? So what then happened is people then started doing riots against the banks because they felt that the banks are screwing them over. Now, first and foremost, why did the banks do this? The banks did this because your savings are a liability to the bank. Your savings at the time used to be an asset to you because at the time, you could save money in the bank and you could get 20% returns on it per annum, which was nice. I mean, it was a decent way. In other words, if you saved 1,000 rand for 1 year in the bank would be able to give you 200 rand, which was very nice because the interest was more than the amount of inflation. Now, inflation meaning cost of living, interest meaning the babies that your money have made, right? Or the amount of money that your capital printed over a period of time. That's an interest, right? So which means the savings were a liability to the bank, which means it costs the banks money to save your money. So then the banks had to loan your money to somebody else. Why? Because because saving your money in the banks was expensive for the banks. And then they could not live up to the promise. Why? Because for one, the first reason is that maybe at the time the banks did not discover the best formula as to how to vet people so that they can be able to qualify for the loans that they requested, right? That could be number one. And then secondly, maybe also the second reason would be that people also failed to pay the bank, the returns. So the banks were failing. Then there was this huge riot that happened, and then against the banks. And then what happened is, the government then decided to give its people an ear, and come with a solution with regards to it. So when the government decided, okay, we are going to work on a law to pass legislation for the banks to pass legislation for the banks not to screw people over. So we will have control over the banking industry. And then the big boys of the banking companies at the time quickly told the government, that listen, no, we do not want the government to come and control our industry. What we want is we will regulate it ourselves. So the big boy companies at the time, your JP Morgans, your biggest companies in the US got together, and then they went into an island that we call the Jekyll Island, right? Jekyll Island. Now in the Jekyll Island, that's where a lot of the disasters or problems that you and I see today started happening. A lot of the financial disasters that we see today happened because or as a result of the meeting that happened in Jekyll Island. Now what happened in Jekyll Island? In Jekyll Island, it was, these banks, the banks that were there, or the representative of the banks that were there, at least presented or, represented over 1/4 of the world's wealth. In other words, 1/4 of the world's wealthiest men were presented in this meeting at Jekyll Island. And what was this meeting about? Now, we would unfold a little bit about what this meeting was about. So in that meeting, as I said, it was for the big boys to pass legislation themselves. Now bear this, these are normal citizens like yourself and I coming together, wanting to protect their business and also wanting to have control over the money supply of countries. Now, back in the time, the governments used to print money and give the money to the banks. In other words, the government used to be in control of the supply chain of money in a country. But this meeting was one of the first meetings that were meant to change. Now, then these guys formed or passed an act that we call the Federal Reserve Act, which is what you and I commonly know today as the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, what does the Federal Reserve Bank do? Now, according to the public's definition or understanding, the Federal Reserve Bank was created to regulate banks from scamming people, to regulate banks from stealing money from the public or from not honoring their commitments, especially in relation to the public. So the public was made to believe that the Reserve Bank was formed to protect their interests. But guess what? The Federal Reserve Bank was actually formed not to protect the interest of the public, but the Federal Reserve Bank was formed to control the money supply of countries. So what does this teach you and I first and foremost? Is that the banks invest or are on a mission for control. That's the first and most important reason why you invest. It's for control. The reason why I don't invest in the JSE, is because I have no control. I have no say over the companies that are listed in the JSE. I'm just a glorified shareholder who will only make money when the prices of the shares goes up. That's why I don't invest in the JSE, because there is no control. I don't have influence to protect my capital. I don't have influence to make sure that the company makes the best decisions to protect my interest, which is my profit, my investment, right? So another thing that I want you to pay attention to is that the banks, why then do the banks not give you a loan for you to invest in the JSE? It's for the same reason. It's because if you lose your money in the JSE, who are you going to cry to? Who do you report to? Who do you hold accountable for your money? Absolutely no one. Who cares? You lose your money, you lose your money. You are still a glorified shareholder, right? Now, that's the reason why for me, it does not make sense to invest in the JSE. Well, a lot of people do it and they make a decent amount of money and they make a lot of money. It requires a certain amount of skill and education as well. But for me, I rather invest for control. I want to have a say and control over whatever asset I invest in. It's a very important aspect of what these guys do. Now, another thing I need you to pay attention to. So the first thing we've got an answer is control, right? Now, the Federal Reserve Bank also is there to print money. Now, I want you to think of this. If you are in control of the supply of money to a country, it means you can print as much money as you can. Now, one of the sons of the founder of Rothschild made a very interesting statement. He said that I do not care who is in charge of the British Empire. I do not care who's sitting on the throne or who is the president of the British Empire. All I know is the man who is in control of the supply chain of a country controls the country. Let me repeat that. The man who is in control of the supply chain of money in a country controls where the money goes. Let us just quickly assist. We've got someone who's just trying to connect. I just want to help them be able to connect. Awesome. Awesome. I think awesome now. Yeah. I think now he's winning. Awesome. Welcome, Bongani. Awesome. You are welcome, man. So now, as I was saying, so he said that, I do not care who's in control of the British Empire. I don't care who is the president. I don't care who's on the throne. All I know is the man who owns the supply of money to the British Empire is the one who runs and owns or controls the British Empire. So everyone else is just a puppet. And when this guy said in his sentence, now in the British Empire, I am the one who supplies money to the British Empire. I am the one who is in control. Now this made me question a lot of things, because most of the time I always ask myself the question, do we really think politicians are stupid? Do we really think politicians are making mistakes? Do we really think that politicians are doing whatever it is that they are doing because they don't care? Because they care or they don't care? Do you think politicians actually have control? Now, this is your answer. The Federal Reserve Bank controls what happens in a country. Now, this for me made me, after reading this book, I thought and sought after a lot of things. I asked myself a very important question about China, right? And you look at, you think about it, China invested over $60 billion in 2018, around about August, October, September, around about that time, knowing very well that in 2019 we were going to have elections. And my question is, if China did not know who was going to be president the next year, why then would they invest $60 billion? If you don't know who will be in control of the country the following year, why would you make an investment? Think about it from an investment point of view. Would you invest in a business which you know that the presidents get re-elected every year or two? Would you reinvest in that business for the long term, not knowing who will be in control the next year? You would not, right? So this made me know that even countries, when they issue or print money, we're talking about World Bank, your IMF, your reserve banks, when they borrow money to countries, they borrow money to countries first and foremost to control those countries. Now, let's move to the second C. This is another C that is very important. So we spoke about the banks investing for control, right? The big first world countries like China investing for control. And then now let's move to the second C. The second C that banks invest for, they invest for collateral. They invest for collateral. In other words, they invest against something. They invest against your future income. They invest against, the assets of that particular country. They invest against your 3 months bank statements. They invest against your gold. They invest against the natural resources of a country. Now, this made me, again, think deep. Before money became what it is today, money, was backed by gold. And when money was backed by gold, in other words, what this meant, it is that the banks used to say, your gold, people used to store their gold or value in the banks, right? And then this gold would be stored in the bank vaults. And then the banks then printed what you and I know today as bank notes, or paper money, or paper claims, or the money that you and I use today to trade. So banks then printed that money against your savings or against what you stored or your store of value in terms of gold. In other words, if you had 10,000 rands worth of gold saved in your bank vault, you could go to the bank and make a loan and get a bank note worth 10,000 rand against your gold, which means if you could not pay back the bank's 10,000 rand or bank notes with interest, the bank would then confiscate your gold, which means you then forfeited your ownership of the gold which you saved in. So then an educational system called school was then created to teach people about the importance of saving money. Why? Because the banks wanted people to encourage people to save money. And then back then, people were encouraged to save their gold or store their gold in bank vaults because they were safety guaranteed. Because if you imagine if you were a multimillionaire and you stored gold in your house, you would attract thieves, you would attract gangsters, people to come and rob into your house and break in. So that they built this system called the banking system as well to also teach and encourage people to store their value of gold and also to print paper money for people to trade using paper money, banknotes, which is what as you and I would call it today, against the gold. Now, because people were not educated on money, people don't know the difference between an asset and a liability. People then use those paper money or paper claims or banknotes, as you and I would call it today, to lose. In other words, people then could not pay back the bank's banknotes. Then they confiscated gold. And then there was a new problem. The new problem was that there was a lack of supply of money or lack of circulation of money in countries, which then made, the Federal Reserve Bank push presidents to take currencies off the gold standard. which means when money was taken off the gold standard, this meant, guys, that money could then be printed, and money could be printed unlimited, right? Which means now it was no longer about how much gold a country owns or the citizens of a country own that determines the amount of circulation of money that circulates in a country. Now it was more about money being printed, and it was unlimited. Then words like inflation came about, which is the cost of living. Now the cost of living on average grows by an average of 7% per annum. In other words, the cost of bread goes up by an average of 7%. The cost of living, your petrol, your oil, your transport, and whatever, which means the cost of survival goes up by an average of 7% per annum. But today, the bank pays you an interest of, on average, of 6.5% per annum. Now, in other words, guys, if you save 1,000 Rand per year in the bank, right, or at the bank gives you 65 Rand per year. And from that 65 Rand, the cost of living grew up by 70 Rand in that year. In other words, you are getting paid an interest of minus 0.5%, minus 0.5% interest per annum. Now that's before taxes, and you still have to pay for a tax for your savings, right? Which means it could then give you the answer of minus 0.3% per annum, which means, in fact, you are the one paying the banks for them to keep your money instead of them paying you to keep your money. Very interesting, right? So that's another thing. So then the most common question that Robert Kiyosaki, one of my role models, always asks is, why save money then when the banks are printing money? Why save money when governments are printing money? Did you know that for every 1 Rand you save in the bank can print 10 times the value and loan to the next person? In other words, guys, if you save 1,000 Rand in the bank can print 10,000 Rand and loan the 10,000 Rand to the next person. And you're still getting paid minus 0.5% interest per annum, yet you are continuing to make the banks richer through a system called the fractional reserve banking system. Right? Now that sucks, guys. You look at that, that's modern day robbery. It's and look at it like this. The people who own or who run the Federal Reserve banking system are people like myself and yourself. If you and I were to print money or counterfeit money, or or print fake money, do you know what would happen to us? You and I would land in jail. But these guys are eligible or are legally, robbing us of our wealth because they are able to do that. We are living in that's why we always say that saving your money in the bank is the best way to lose value. Because the second thing that's happening to you when you save money, it is that you are saving a stronger 1,000 Rand today to earn a weaker 1,000 Rand a year later, 5 years later. In other words, your money that you saved loses purchasing power every year. Right? Now, I want you to pay close attention to what I meant when I said the banks invest for collateral. Let's take a deeper look at what we mean by that. So when the banks issue you a loan, or when you are going to the bank and asking them to buy a property or a loan of 1 million Rand, 2 million Rand, whatever you qualify for, the first thing that the bank then asks you is your 3 months bank statement. Why? Because they want to bet against your future income. They want to bet against your future income, right? Now, you have not earned that money, but they want to bet against it. So that's the collateral. So the first collateral they're looking for is against your future income. The second form of collateral that banks look for is that what you will be using the money for. No, I'll be buying a property. Awesome. So when you are going to be buying a property, the banks would rather give you a lot of money for you to buy or invest in something whereby they know they can confiscate it. Another word is they know they can repossess it. So why do the banks invest for collateral? For you to buy a car or to buy a house? It is because buyers put. They can confiscate it when you fail to pay. Now, somebody like yourself, goes and hears somebody say, hey, invest in my business, this and this and this. And you invest in them. Or for example, somebody says, listen, invest 100,000 rand on my Forex business, I will trade for you. And then you invest your 100,000 rand, and then they say they'll give you 10,000 rand a month. And then they blow their account. They come back to you, the money is gone. Who do you cry to? What can you confiscate? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The 100,000 rand is gone because you do not understand the game of investing. The game was being played on you, right? It's a very scary place to be. I think Thulisile is struggling with connecting her, to the thingy, to what you call this. Awesome. I think, yeah, she's struggling to connect to the sound. So I just wanted to help her there. She should just read on the chat. I hope that that information will be able to help her connect to the sound. Now, so that's another thing. Is that so now we discussed two things: the banks invest for control. Secondly, the banks invest for collateral. Now let's look at something, another interesting thing nationally. So I asked this question to a friend of mine. Would you invest in a country like South Africa, where you know that there is corruption? There's basically no justice system here, where people do things and get away with things. People do crime, get away with things. People rape women and get away with things. A lot of people are getting away with murder. Would you invest in a country that's not just only that, but a country that is leaking money, that is losing money, where money is literally being looted by the politicians? Would you invest in a country that you know is losing money? Would you invest in a broke government? Now, this is funny. Just a few days ago, I was reading Uguti, our government in South Africa missed out the deadline to pay for a vaccine. He was supposed to pay about 327 million rands, and our government did not have. And you ask yourself a question: we were loaned just $500 billion not so long ago, and there's not even 327 million rand. Would you invest in a country like that? And the smart answer that all of us would most likely give is no, I would not. Why? Because of the same reasons that I've been sharing. So what did the IMF, World Bank, or the Federal Reserve Bank loan money to South Africa? Answer: it's because of collateral. Yes, the country is not making money, but collateral. It's because they're investing against the country's resources, the country's natural resource. Guys, think about it. We've got gold in South Africa that we don't own, silver, diamonds in South Africa. That apparently, I heard Uguti gold is actually being refined in other countries, then it's shipped back to us, sold to us as in very expensive labor. Right? Why? It is because our country lost the natural resources or gave in the natural resources against the law. Now, before we go into depth, I want to tackle something very important. What is money? What is money? Because I want you to understand ukuthi kwenzeka ntoni behind the money system so that you can understand how to invest in property. And if you may like how to invest in cryptocurrencies, right? And why to invest in these too. Now, this is very important. So what is money? Real money is gold all the time. Gold and silver is real money. So mamela guys, mamela evaluating. So in other words, we traded real money, gold and silver, for fake money, for counterfeit money, for paper money, for money that is constantly declining or losing value, for money that will soon be worthless in no time. So you exchange real money, which is God's money that never loses value, which will always be money. Long before you and I are gone, gold and silver will always be money, right? Today, your 50 rand, your 50 rand 15 years ago could buy you 2 liters of Coke and 2 loaves of bread, and you could still have slices of bologna in it. But today, with 50 bucks, you can only buy 2 liters of Coke, or 1 2-liter of Coke, and 1 loaf of bread. Right? Why is it that? It is because 50 rand, it's because that 50 rand lost value. That 50 rand lost purchasing power. Right? So in other words, we trade real money, which is the real wealth, so that we could gain fake money, counterfeit money. Why is it fake? Because they can print unlimited amounts of it. They can print unlimited amounts of money. Money is printed every single day by the Reserve Banks. Unlimited amount of money. Money that is constantly declining in value. Right? Always bear in mind. Now, another thing I needed to bear in mind is, what does the word credit mean? Because when they took money off the gold standard, money stopped being money. Money then became debt. So when money got off the gold standard, money became debt. That's why there is good debt and there is bad debt. What is bad debt? Bad debt is debt that you pay yourself. Good debt is debt that pays itself and also pays for its maintenance and also pays you. It's debt that pays you. Right? Very important. Right? So because people do not know what is good debt or toxic debt and what is bad debt, they then found themselves investing in the JSE, which in my opinion is toxic assets or fake assets, because you are a shareholder, but you have no say. You are a shareholder, but you don't get paid every month. In other words, you're investing. Look at all the companies that are listed in the JSE. They are companies that make money every day. It's companies that that are listed that you and I could go and buy food from and trade today and get paid today, right? But when as a so-called shareholder invested in the JSE, you're not getting paid every day, let alone being paid every month. You only get paid or make your money when your share increases in value. Then you make money when you sell. Meantime, they own the real asset. They are earning money from day one. When are you earning money because you're waiting for it to go up in value? That's scary in my opinion. That's a toxic asset. It's an asset that you have no say over. It's an asset that you cannot influence the outcomes and what happens in there. That's pretty scary. So the third thing that the banks invest for is cash flow. Cash flow. The banks invest for cash flow. Quick question. When the bank issues you a loan, a bond, mortgage, or whatever kind of loan there is, when do they expect you to start paying back the loan? You start paying off the loan as from next month. And as from next month, you're going to pay this loan for a certain period of time. So in other words, the banks work once and they get paid for a lifetime. Now, Why do I invest in property? So that I can get for cash flow. I invest in property so that I can work once and get paid for a lifetime, just like the banks. A bank comes and approves your loan or your mortgage or your bond once. You are the one who goes to work to collect the money to pay who? The bank. Now, let's talk about this word mortgage. Mortgage is derived from a French word that means mortier. A mortier means an agreement until death. So in other words, the banks want you enslaved to them for as long as possible until the casket drops. Now, why is that? It's because the name of the game is whom is indebted to whom. The more people you have indebted to yourself, the more wealthier you become. That's why banks will always give you a rope to hang yourself. They are in the cash flow business. They are in the cash flow business. Money coming in every month. The more people you have indebted to you, the more wealthy you become. Now, another very important word I want to speak to you about is the word leverage. What does leverage mean? Leverage means the ability to do more and more with less and less effort, or the ability to serve more people with less and less effort. Another definition would be the ability to earn more with less and less effort. Now, a very wise man once said, leverage is earning 1% of 100 people's income. So why do we do cryptocurrencies and network marketing? It is because we want to earn 1% of 100 people's incomes. Because when you pass on, will people stop working? Will your downline stop working because you passed on? No, they've got their dreams, they've got their goals, so they will continue working. So that's another type of business that you can pass on to your kids, because people will always, always, always be there. As long as the sun wakes up every morning to give us light, as long as the moon wakes up every evening to give us light, there will always be people. And these people will always be working because they need to put food on the table, because they need to make money, because they need to build wealth, whatever their reasons are. But your people will always be working. People will always be committed to work. That's the first thing. Now, why do I invest in property particularly? Property gives me the ability to earn 30% to 40% of the average person's income. The average person pays 30% to 40% of their monthly income paying off a bond or renting. So what does this mean to me? So then for me, I want to earn 30% to 40% of 100 people's incomes every month. So I want to work once on a property project, build a property system around it, find properties that can produce monthly cash flow income, put tenants in there who will pay 20 to 30%, if not 40% of their monthly income on a monthly basis. Why wouldn't I be rich? Why wouldn't I be wealthy? Are you guys with me? So that's one of the biggest reasons why we invest in property. It's because of the power of leverage, the power of numbers. People will all sorry about that, guys. Somebody just tried calling me. I hope I'm back. Um, can you guys please confirm again if you can hear me? Please just write a chat if you can hear me. Somebody just tried calling me and then it just took me off. Yeah, thank you so much, Zama. Thank you so much. So as I was saying, so that's what leverage helps me to do. Leverage enables me to be able to connect, for me to be able to make more money, from 100 people with less and less effort. So what do we do in property? We find good deals that make good sense, raise capital using the bank's money, private investors' money, private equity investors' money, private institutions or financial institutions' money for me to be able to build my empire. So I work or find this property business property opportunity, once finance it, build a system around it. After building a system around it, I then have this system produce money for me every single month. Why? Because it's the tenants who need to wake up every morning and go to work to collect my money for me, to collect the rental income for me. And then it gets paid to me every single month. Every single month. Without me lifting a finger, I worked once and I get paid for a long time. Now that's what rich people do. They invest in property like the banks. Guys, if there's one thing I need you to take from this meeting, take one thing. If you are going to be investing in any business, any project, any property, whatever it is, use these 3 C's for you to your advantage. The first one, we said it's control. You want to be able to have a say over the asset. Secondly, it is collateral. Why? Because you want to be able to, when things go wrong, you can at least recoup some of it. And then the last thing, thirdly, is cash flow. Guys, I always say, I don't understand how one would put up with getting paid 12 times out of 365 days. You work the same job, you do the same routines 5 times a week, 8 to 10 or whatever, 8 to 9, 8 to 5, whatever the hours are, you do the same thing and the same income for 365 days. Out of 365 days, you're getting paid 12 times? That doesn't make sense for me. I'd rather work once and get paid 12 times out of 365 days. Not do the same thing, right? So now I usually say, the reason why you would rather build a well than buy water, you want to build a well because when you have a well, you are assured that whenever the rain pours, more wealth comes. Whenever the rain pours, more wealth comes. Water, you have loads and liters to gallons of water as opposed to buying water. In other words, what I'm trying to say to you guys is, when building wealth, always think of this wealth gain as something like a well. And the best time to dig a well is to dig a well not when you are thirsty, because then it's too late to dig a well before you are thirsty. If you are going to be building any empire of some sort, build it before it gets bad at your job or at your work. Right? Now, in closing, I'm going to close with my 2 favorite statements. Right? So we usually get 2 types of investors. You get the rancher investor, and you get the dairy investor. You could say the rancher farmer or the dairy farmer. So both of them invest or buy cows or cattle. But when they look at a cow, they look at a cow for different reasons. One looks at a cow to slaughter and sell the meat. The other one looks at the very same cow or looks at a cow to milk it and make a business out of the milking. Not from the asset itself, but from the milking. Now, more often than not, a lot of people, when they invest for today. They invest for pleasure, and just like the rancher. They invest to show off on social media, to look good, to show off the cars, to buy Go 5, buy whatever, to fit in with the trend. But then they keep counting the money that they're entrusted with today. They chow the money that they're entrusted with today instead of thinking about it. Did you know that in South Africa, we've got more women owning properties than young men? Because young men are focused on cars. Women are focused on value, right? Actually, we gotta clap hands for women because they're doing well. They're showing the lead, but it's a concern for guys. Because if men cannot lead or, or step up to the plate, then as men, we are in trouble, right? The country's in trouble because the man does not want to grow up, right? So it's very important that we realize that, when it comes to investing, you need to have the approach of a dairy farmer. What does a dairy farmer do? A dairy farmer, he invests in cows or buys cows so that he can be able to milk them. When he milks them, he produces cheese and sells the cheese. When he milks them, he produces milk and sells the milk. When he milks them, he produces yogurt, sells the yogurt. When he milks them, he produces milk, right? So, and then he uses that money to buy more assets, cows. So what am I trying to say to you guys? It's that it is very important that when you are going to be investing in property, look for deals that we call cash flow cows. Look for deals that, bring monthly income. I mean, guys, Mamelang guys, look, the minute you walk out of home, that's money. The minute you wake up, you're spending money. You switch on the lights and you light, that's money. You're spending money. The minute you are hungry, you're spending money. The minute you want to go to the toilet for whatever, to exercise or sanitation, right? You're spending money, right? Which means as long as you are a living being, you are always spending money. So why not then make money every day? Why not have a mission or push to invest in businesses or properties or in entities that will enable you to be able to get paid every single day? Because uninzi lwengxaki zethu zidinga imali ngoku, zidinga cash flow ngoku. Why should you invest, to get your first money after 10 years? No, we're investing for capital growth. No, a lot of people say, no, you'll never go wrong with property. You never go wrong with property. Why? Because you buy a property for 1 million rand today, you keep it for 10 years. After 10 years, it will be worth 4 million rand. Do these people ever calculate the cost of keeping a property for 10 years? Keeping a property for 10 years includes your utility bills, includes your taxes and rates, it includes your maintenance of that property. Then there's still bond that needs to be paid monthly. That's expenses. That's money coming in out every month. And you're telling me that I must buy a property of 1 million rand today to wait for 10 years for me to see 3 million? Only to learn, to discover, dismay that after that period of time, I probably spent plus minus the same amount of money that I'm expecting. That's not investing, folks. That's not investing. And a lot of people who thought that they could never go wrong with property, guess what happened to them this year? They went wrong with property. Why? Because they did not have adequate information. They did not have the adequate knowledge. They did not understand the 3 important C's of investing in property: control, collateral, and cash flow. When they lost their jobs, when they got retrenched, they couldn't pay off their bills. They couldn't keep their most important investment or their biggest investment, which is property. They couldn't keep it, guys. And the reason why they couldn't keep it is this because they did not understand what they were doing in the first place. That is why we always say that the first and most important investment that you can ever make is not in property. You can never go wrong with property. You can. You can go dismally wrong. You can dismally go so wrong you'd never believe it. It's unbelievable. It's ridiculous. Right? So always make sure that you educate yourself. The biggest single and most important project and investment you can ever work on is Project Self. If you have all the right knowledge, if you have all the right skills, you could never go wrong because you are equipped with the right knowledge. But guess what happens? Guess what happens? People find it smart to go to school, to learn, to be a professional. And when they go to school, they study and they learn to become professionals, to earn the incomes of professionals. But when it comes to business, they don't want to learn or even buy books, attend seminars, pay for online courses, online mentorship classes, or whatever the case is. They find spending 3,000 Rand, 10,000 Rand expensive. Yet they made a 200,000 Rand loan to learn to become economic slaves. Now, when they need to learn to become financially free, then the cost becomes too much. It's crazy. Think about it. Becoming an economic slave, becoming financially free costs less than becoming an economic slave. But one sees this one is so expensive, yet this gives them financial freedom. Yeah, and then sees this one, to be, well fitting in the norms of society. Why? Because everybody says you could never go wrong with school. But guess what's happening today? So the biggest and most important investment you can ever make is not in property, it's not in cryptocurrencies, it's not in any other thing, it's not in forex, it's not in what other businesses, it's not in trucks, it's not in commercial businesses, not in offices, it's not in cars. The best and most important investment you can make is in yourself. You are the most important investment. You are the most important investment, right? So we saw people going wrong. We saw people lose their deals this year. Why? Because they did not know the 3 C's of property. Cash flow, guys. Cash flow is king. Cash is trash. Cash flow is king. Money coming in every day is king, right? You'd rather build the children a fountain of wealth than giving them a bucket of water. You'd rather build them a well than giving them a bucket full of water. I'm going to open an opportunity for you guys to ask questions. You guys can unmute yourselves. Let's do this. So you guys can unmute yourselves to ask questions, and I'll be looking forward to answering the question. Anybody with a question? Awesome. I assume that nobody has a question. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Now, to schedule your one-on-one or 15-minute phone call with me as to how you can learn more about property, to find out more about our educational products from Ngoyi Legacy. Okay, it's the Creature of Jekyll Island. It's the Creature of Jekyll Island. I'll write it down on the chats for you, right? It's the Creature of Jekyll Island by Edward Griffiths, right? So if you want to find out more about our educational products that we've got in the Ngoyi Legacy, you can inquire to me on my WhatsApp, send me a WhatsApp or send me an inbox on Facebook, or send me an inbox and I'll send you the link for you to be able to schedule your 15-minute free Zoom meeting or phone call with myself. Then I'll teach you more about our educational products. Also to learn about our investment opportunities as to how you can co-own properties with us and be a shareholder with us and get paid on a monthly basis. You can also click on the WhatsApp button to schedule your meeting, or you can schedule your 15-minute free Zoom meeting on my website so that you can be able to connect with me. With all that being said, thank you so much, guys. You guys have been an amazing audience. Hope you guys have learned so much. I will upload the video on YouTube later today so that you guys can equip yourselves as much as possible. With all that being said, thank you so much. I hope you guys have learned a lot, and may God bless you guys. Thank you so much. Take care.